A workplace investigator's main job is pretty straightforward in theory, but quite demanding in practice. They are there to find the facts. When a situation is messy, emotional, or full of conflicting stories, the investigator's role is to step in and turn that confusion into a clear, structured, and evidence-based account of what actually happened. At the core, everything they do supports that goal. First, they're focused on establishing the truth. That doesn't mean deciding who is right in a subjective sense. It means figuring out as accurately as possible what actually occurred in relation to a complaint, allegation, or policy concern. The investigator is essentially trying to rebuild the sequence of events using reliable information. To do that, they gather and manage evidence in a structured way. This includes interviewing the complainant, respondent, and witnesses, but also reviewing documents, emails, messages, policies, attendance records, and sometimes digital or forensic data. A good investigator doesn't just collect information, they organize it so it can be properly understood and tested. Once the information is gathered, the next step is analysis. This is where the investigator looks at how consistent the different accounts are, whether they align with the available evidence, and whether there are gaps or contradictions that need to be explained. Witness credibility often becomes part of this process, not in a personal or judgmental way, but in terms of reliability, consistency, and whether the account fits with other known facts. Importantly, investigators also apply the correct standard of proof. In workplace investigations, this is usually the balance of probability standard, meaning they are asking whether something is more likely than not to have happened, rather than trying to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, like in a criminal case. This is a key distinction that shapes how findings are made. Throughout the entire process, neutrality is essential. A professional investigator is expected to stay independent and objective, even when the case is sensitive or emotionally charged. They are not there to advocate for either side or to let personal opinions influence their conclusions. The focus always has to stay on the evidence. Another major responsibility is documentation. The investigator has to keep clear, detailed records of interviews, evidence reviewed, and steps taken during the process. At the end, all of this comes together in a formal investigation report. That report explains what was done, what information was considered, and what factual findings were reached based on the evidence. One of the most important boundaries in this role is that the investigator is not the decision-maker. Their job is to find and present the facts, not to decide on discipline or consequences. Once the report is completed, it is usually management or a designated decision-maker who determines what actions, if any, should follow. In short, the investigator acts as the neutral fact-finder who brings structure, clarity, and evidence-based reasoning to situations that would otherwise remain unclear or contested.